appreciate you agreeing to speak with us. I've been on the World Affairs Council Board of Directors for 7 years, and Marianne, our CEO, asked us, how can we elevate the council? And I said, we need to focus on our veterans. And when I heard you speak, Nick, in Utah at a veteran event, it blew me away, blew my socks away. You represent the very best of us. You're a true American, and I had to have you come speak, and I'm so grateful that you are here. So today I want to talk to you about a little bit about my story, but the biggest part of that is I want to pay tribute to our Vietnam vets. So I know I spoke to a couple of you who have served in Vietnam, so would you please stand up? You guys are the reason I'm here, and so many other Vietnamese people are here. You know, when I served in Desert Storm and I fought and liberated Kuwait, I didn't realize the ripple effect that did. I was a soldier, a young kid. I did my job, but I didn't realize until I went to business school 20-something years later, and my classmates who were worked from Kuwait came up to me and just told me like they were just teenagers and you guys saved us and our families, and I didn't realize the impact I had. When Afghanistan fell, it broke my heart. And for me, it was like deja vu when it happened in Vietnam. And I felt like, what were we there for? The brothers we lost, what was it for? My message to you is, you didn't lose the Vietnam War, and we didn't lose the Afghanistan War. Our politicians did, but not us. So today I want to talk to you about mountains. I equate the problems that we all face as mountains in our path. You ever had a problem where you felt so overwhelmed that you didn't feel like there was a way out of it? That it was so intimidating, so challenging that you don't know how you can get through it? For me, that's a mountain. You know, so my story of coming here, I have met so many different mountains on the way. And, you know, as I stood at the bottom of each one, I felt intimidation. I felt fear. I didn't know how I was going to get over that mountain. But eventually I'll show you, as I share my story, how I overcame each and every one of those mountains. But more importantly, what I did after I reached the top, and I'm sitting up there, basking in the glory. I didn't stay up there. I looked on the horizon and saw the mountains. I made myself down that mountain and went to another mountain. So my story is about gratitude for this country, for our Vietnam vets who fought for our freedoms, for our constitutional republic. And those of you who may not know from history, Vietnam was a constitutional republic, just like the United States. We modeled it after the United States. There's an executive, judicial, legislative branch. You guys fought for our freedom to have that great life. And also service to this country who opened up her arms for me and my father as we escaped in our darkest hour. And my service, subsequent to that, to repay what I felt was a life debt for you guys and for this country. So I'll start the story with how I learned how to overcome these mountains and the challenges. I was a dumb private in boot camp when going on my first ruck march. And as a dumb, inexperienced private, I saved a brand new pair of boots, one just looked like that, for the ruck march. Yeah, you're laughing because you know, what a dumbass, right? I pulled the tag off the boots, you know, GI issue, dumbass issue, pulled it off, put on new boots, and headed out for my ruck march. Things you don't do. Other things you don't do is like socks. Who needs socks? Ounces equal pounds, pounds equals pain. I left socks. Got socks. Long story short, 2 miles down the ruck march. It's a 12-mile ruck march. You have to make it within 3 hours, or you get to do it all over again on that Saturday when everybody's going to town. This was Fort Bragg, going to town in Fayetteville, getting drunk and buying cars, or financing at 10 years for 35% interest. I wasn't going to miss out on that. So I had to finish that ruck march in 3 hours. 4th mile, my blisters were getting really big, starting to have a lot of pain. Didn't bring any socks, so I'm not going to change socks. I just keep on going. Well, by the 6th mile, the blisters burst. Skin rubbed off my feet. And the boots had weep holes for sweat. Blood was coming out of those weep holes. And I had to pull out on the side of the road. It was just too painful, too agonizing. And I was like, I can't finish this. Drill sergeant came up to me and saw me on the side of the road, say, what's going on? So I showed him my foot, and he looked bad. And I was like, can I ride with the medics back to base? And he said, no. He looked at me in the eye, and he said, what would you do in combat? So I understood. It's not what I wanted to hear. It's what I needed to hear. So I pulled my boots back on, strapped it on, and started heading down the road. Each painful, agonizing step. I didn't know how I was going to make the last 6 miles. What I've learned is when my body was done, it said, it's time to shut this down and go home. My mind was much stronger. And what my mind told me was, take that next step. Then take another. And another. I focused on small, achievable wins. I saw a rock down the road. I'm going to walk to that. Down that hill. I'm going to make it down the hill. There's a tree over there. I'm going to make it down to that tree. Instead of thinking, oh my God, I've got 6 more miles of this, I focused on those little accomplishments and those little wins. I finished the ruck march in 2 hours and 44 minutes without skin on my feet, blood coming out. That's the day I found myself, my true self. When again, your body and everything around you tells you it's time to quit. But I will tell you, people say mind over matter. It truly is. Because my mind and your mind, all of our minds are much stronger than what we think we're capable of. So again, my story is about gratitude for our Vietnam vets who fought, who went on the other side of the world and fought and came home to an ungrateful nation who called them baby killers, who spat on them, who never got the welcome home you deserve. To this country, who for me and others is the beacon of hope for the world. There's nowhere else I want to escape to. There's no other country I want to live in. Yes, I was born in Vietnam, but I'm an American. When I went to war, the flag on my right shoulder was an American flag. It wasn't any other flag. And again, there's no other country I would pledge an allegiance to or want to live and raise my family. There's no other country I love. So my story starts with my father. He was a legendary colonel in the South Vietnamese Army. And the United States welcomes their allies to cross-train at times. And my father was invited to the Command General Staff College in Leavenworth as a senior officer in the South Vietnamese Army. He spent a couple of years there, graduated. He got to tour West Point as well. And he came home and adopted some of the best practices from both of those academies. And he was the commandant for the Dalit Military Academy in South Vietnam to grow a crop of officer cadets for the South Vietnamese Army. They've had cadets go through there before, but my dad changed the curriculum. He wanted the students, instead of studying by-the-book, textbook doctrine, he wanted them to use critical thinking in their decision-making. What he instilled in them is personal sacrifice, and not that you're going to graduate from this prestigious college so you can have rank and power and eventually money. He believed that your rank, your power, is to serve your men. He wanted them to understand it's about true patriotism and true service. The name that he was nicknamed for the group of cadets that grew out of there were called lepers, because they challenged the status quo. Those who were used to doing things one way And they were seen as the outsiders. No one wanted to talk to them because they did not want to meet. They wanted to raise the bar, and no one wanted to be part of that. So they're somewhat ostracized, but the lepers became a legend because they were some of the most brave officers that fought in the war, usually to the end with their men, did not retreat because of the love of their country. On the night of April 29th, before the fall of Saigon, I was 5 years old, sleeping in my bed. My dad came in my bedroom, woke me up, picked me out of bed. Normally, my dad he had a very loving face, very happy. That night, he had a very worried look on his face. He picked me up, carried me downstairs into the basement where my grandmother and my nanny were already waiting for us. He handed me to my nanny, kissed me on the forehead, and he ran outside where there were 2 military jeeps waiting for him. He jumped on the jeeps and took off into the night. I'm sitting on my nanny's lap, and in the basement, there's a transom window. And I see flashes of light, and I hear sounds of what I thought was thunder. That's what a 5-year-old kid thinks. It was a thunderstorm. So I broke free from my nanny. I ran on that table. I got on top. I looked out the window, and in the horizon, it's just flashes of light, flickering. Sounds of deep drums is what it sounded like to me. Of course, they were not thunder or lightning. It was explosions of the communist, Vietnam, North Vietnamese, and Viet Cong forces coming into the city, invading into the city of Saigon, which is the capital of South Vietnam, where I was born and lived. Earlier that night, my father received a call from Lieutenant General, 3-star general. He was the last chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff for the Vietnamese Army. My father and General Vinh Loc served together and were classmates at the academy. They were both colonels when my dad left the military. He left the military 10 years before I was born. He was tired of the corruption. He was friends with the first president, President Diem, who took over from the king who abdicated his throne. President Diem and my father, he trusted my father, and they became friends. And when President Diem was assassinated, he was done with the military. He didn't want to do any more of the corruption. He left. He went and worked for an oil and gas company called Esso. We know that here as ExxonMobil. But he spent 10 years as a senior executive at Esso. But that night, he got a call from General Vinh Loc, Lieutenant General Vinh Loc. They were classmates. He trusted my father. He knew my father's reputation preceded him. In the memoir he wrote for me, my father said, General Vinh Loc quoted, "The president and the chief joints of staff used their privilege to get on American planes and get their families out and left us here alone. Those bastards abandoned us." General Vinh Loc became automatically the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was there at the headquarters trying to coordinate a counteroffensive against the 20 divisions of Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces coming into our city. And he said, "I need your help. You're a brilliant strategist. I know you've been a civilian for this time, but you have a reputation, and I know you love our country." So my dad, without hesitation, said, I'll be there. General Vinh Loc sent 2 jeeps to our house to escort my dad back to headquarters. They coordinated a counterattack with what was left of 2 airborne divisions, and what was left of the Air Force. The man that commanded those 2 divisions was Lieutenant Colonel Quy Bu. That's a picture of my dad, President Diem, my dad who was the commandant of the academy, presenting, at that time, Second Lieutenant Bu with his sword. Lieutenant Colonel Bu was the class victorian of that class in 1962. And then he later on commanded the 2 divisions against the 20 enemy divisions that were coming to Saigon. The reason we're doing the counter-offensive was to buy more time for people in Saigon to escape. This is not in history books. As I'm writing my own book, It will be featured in there, and I'll detail it. But those men sacrificed for the people of Vietnam because they believed what my dad taught them, which is sacrifice for your country, for your fellow man. Buying Saigon more time. They fought hard. They took a lot of casualties. As you know that quote at the end, no greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends, not just their friends, but for the people of Saigon. Tens and thousands, if not over 100,000 people escaped during the 6.5 hours that they fought. The goal was to fight, buy some more time. Lieutenant Blue was going to rally with us into the coast and get out of the country with us. They fought hard, but the battle was over. They took heavy losses and they left. When we got to the coast, we never saw Lieutenant Boo. He was captured in that fight. He spent 13 years in a re-education camp. Because when the communists take over the country, they re-educate you, they indoctrinate you. He spent 13 years in a very hard re-education camp. Who he was, it was more like a concentration camp. He didn't get to reunite with his family till much, much later. He finally made it to the United States the year before his son graduated from the military academy. Even though he was a South Vietnamese colonel, he was awarded Silver Star, Bronze Star from the United States. He also attended Command General Staff College in the United States. So he was recognized for his bravery. My dad rushed home, took one of the Jeeps, rushed home to get me in the morning. He ran home out of the Jeep, went upstairs to his office, got some most important paperwork he could, stuffed it into a suitcase, our passports, had some gold bullion, he put it in the briefcase too, and he grabbed a Colt 45 that was given to him from a U.S. officer that he befriended during the war. He grabbed me, and he was trying to convince his mother, my grandmother, to leave with us. My grandmother told him, I'm old, this is my country, I'm not leaving. As much as he tried to beg her to come with us, she would not. I remember as we drove away in the Jeep, I caught him looking in the rearview mirror with tears in his eyes as he saw his mother, my grandmother, for the very last time. The goal for us was to rendezvous to the coast because the airport had already been captured. My mom and dad had separated a few years before that, and she was living in a side of the city that had already been captured. So we never could have gotten her out. That's me and my mom. I never saw her again. That is the part in my story why I remember these things, even though at 5 years old, it was a very traumatic time for me, including with my father's memoir. I'm telling you this story, but those are some of the sacrifices that we made. So as we were going out, driving to the coast, it was an apocalyptic hell. There were burning buildings, rubble from buildings on the ground, vehicles on fire. The road was blocked. We couldn't make it any further by Jeep, so we had to go by foot. Mortars were coming down in our position. I was 5 years old. My dad told me, get on my back. He told me how to hang on. Well, I put my right arm underneath his right arm and the other arm over his shoulder so I could hang on so I wouldn't choke him, but also left his right arm free to use his weapon to defend us. As we're running and mortars are coming down, my dad would tell me, close your eyes, as we were coming up to corpses from the fighting. People, I don't know if you've ever been to a country where the infrastructure had collapsed. Those of us who have fought in wars know what that looks like, but for most people, you don't know. People are fighting for last bits of scraps, not against the enemy, but for each other, killing each other. looting, pillaging. Again, it was apocalyptic hell. It was probably 2 miles to the coast. We got to the coast, we linked up with General Van Locke, and we saw a boat 200 meters out in the ocean. It was a small PT boat. For those of you that are older like me, you've seen that show PT 109. It was one of those boats that the Navy used to patrol the rivers. It was not a seafaring ship. Those boats are made for 18 people. There are over 100 people on that boat. It was 200 meters out in the water. So a man in a small boat, a motorboat, came by and said, hey, jump on board. I'll take you out to that boat. So my father and I, General Van Locke, and 3 of his staff officers in our group jumped on that little boat, and he took us to the PT boat. He said, get on. I'll throw your luggage, but it's more important, just get on. So everybody got on. My dad was the last one to get on the boat. As he climbed on the ladder and put his foot on the rung to get on the boat, the man that ferried us in the small boat pushed the throttle and took off. He knew that people who were escaping the country, fleeing the country, desperate to flee the country, brought the most valuable possessions with him. And he took full advantage of our situation. We literally escaped on the boat with just the clothes on our backs. As that PT boat started to take off towards the Pacific, a man shot himself, a soldier, knowing that he was leaving his family behind. It was a similar boat like that many people on board. It was our only chance. We didn't have any food, fuel, or a plan. We just had to get out. Check. They say you can survive 21 days without food. You can't survive more than 3 days without water. I remember the second night, my throat was burning, my chest was burning. I had not drank, my lips were bleeding. And I looked out the ocean under the moon sky, and I said, Dad, why can't I drink some of that water? We're surrounded. He said, you can't. The best he could do was he dipped his handkerchief into the water and dabbed my lips. In that morning, people started to die from dehydration. As I'm laying in my dad's lap, in his memoir, he told me he pulled out his pistol and contemplated putting me out of my misery and him as well. I was unconscious. What stopped him was a scream in the boat. A young mother, 22 years old, realized her baby infant had died in the night. She picked up her baby and jumped off. People around screamed, but too weak to save her. At some point when he was gone, I died. The woman that was watching over me said I had no pulse, I wasn't breathing, I had died. What I saw during that time was not darkness. I was engulfed in this light, bright light that didn't hurt my eyes. It was what I felt was unimaginable love, unconditional love. I saw a being, looked like a woman, beautiful. I couldn't describe her, but a beautiful woman. She told me, you have to go back. At 11 o'clock, you would be rescued. It was around 9 o'clock that morning. I didn't understand what 11 o'clock meant. Well, how she communicated with me was not through words, but through thought. I told her I wanted to stay. She said, no, you have to go back. When I woke up, the woman that was watching me was freaked out because she thought I was dead and I came back to life. At that point, I didn't feel any more pain, any more hurt. I was exhausted, but all the pain was gone. So she screamed out to my dad, your son, come check out your son. When my dad came, I grabbed his wrist, and this very watch, this is his watch, and I explained to him, when this small needle points here, when this long needle points there, we're going to be rescued. Of course, no one believed me, but people were dying, and they had no hope. So they hung on to that. The word spread throughout the world, and they hung on to that. There was only 2 hours left. They hung on to that. It's like, what? See what happens. No one killed themselves from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock at that time. At 10:37, we received a call on the radio. We had sent out SOS messages throughout the night, but we didn't know if anybody heard our message. The message said, PT 608, we received your message. We know where you're at. We have a destroyer at your location heading your way. At exactly 11 o'clock, a U.S. Navy destroyer from the 7th Fleet rescued us. I can't tell you why I was given that gift. I never had that gift again. It was a one-time thing. Maybe it's just to give people hope, just to hang on for a little bit. That ship took us to Guam in the refugee camp, and we spent a few weeks there, starting over. We came to Houston. My dad was hoping that he was going to find a job with ExxonMobil. In 1975, senior executive Exxon, immigrant, there were no jobs for him at that place. He kept on trying to different places. He was deemed overqualified for everything. He ended up, out of desperation, accepting a job as assistant manager for Stop and Go, a convenience store, sweeping floors at night. He had to do it at nighttime because we didn't know anybody, didn't have money for a babysitter, so he would put me to bed and go to work and come back in the morning. As I grew up, having a father like that, understanding service, paying a debt, I felt a deep obligation that I had to pay this country back. So I did the only thing that I knew I could, enlist in the Army. Aside from patriotism, my dad was too strict. I had to join the military to get away. Single father, colonel, had to get away. Fort Bragg was my first duty station. On August 2nd, 1990, Saddam invaded Kuwait. That was my birthday. I was in favor of having my first legal drink. The club lights went on. The DJ said, all soldiers from Fort Bragg, report back to base. Your units on alert. We headed back to base. All of our command was already at the base, told us the situation and said, we're going to war. Took us 3 weeks to mobilize the entire brigade. Before then, this was the Cold War. We had trained to fight possibly the Russians somewhere in Eastern Europe, never in the desert. We knew that Iraq had just defeated Iran in an 8-year war in a desert, so they had experience fighting in a desert, which we did not. We went there, didn't know any better, but we're still going to go. We're excited. When we first got into position, we were on Saudi Arabia and the border of Saudi Arabia in Iraq. President Bush had gave them, Saddam, a deadline January 15th to get out of Kuwait. That didn't happen, obviously. When we pulled into the position, we're very trained, very well trained. U.S. Army soldiers, light discipline, noise discipline, we try to keep it at minimal. Even trash discipline, we take all our stuff so people don't know how many were there. It was nighttime, and we crested over the hill to go on the other side, me and another guy, to set up fighting positions, and the units had set other fighting positions out. I'm digging into the sand dune, the hill, because it wasn't just sand, it was rocks. Trying to be as quiet as we could, because in night vision, we see the Iraqi positions in the horizon. We're trying to be as quiet as we can. Iraqis are on, probably a couple miles away, and here comes 3 guys, cresting the hill, flashlights flying everywhere. Hello, Americans! We're like, what the? It was the French. They had been there. They saw us move in. They came by to say hi with all their flashlights in the middle of the night. Those are the French. We became friends. So we spent that time together until January 15th, past the deadline. I remember I had just gotten off guard duty at night. 1 in the morning, I was still wired. And then we got the call, get in MOP 3, which is chemical uniforms without the mask. We're in the trenches. And we're hearing, this is January 17th, we're hearing drones flying over. The drone sounds, not drones. Humming sounds flying over. It's B-52s heading to Iraq. There's a shield during the Desert Storm. I was in an artillery regiment, 155 millimeter howitzers. We had fire missions. We shot rounds into enemy targets from January 17th all the way to February 24th, the ground war. We shot every day, hundreds of rounds. High explosives, white phosphorus into enemy positions. I grew up as a Catholic. I served as an altar boy. Thou shalt not kill was part of something that I understood. Even though I was a soldier, it still weighed on me. During battles, during our fire missions, we're full of adrenaline. We're destroying targets. But at nighttime, When I'm crawling my sleeping bag, I would beg for forgiveness for the lives that I took. I felt guilt, and I would cry myself to sleep at night at times. But in the morning, when it was time to do my mission, I was back on, doing what I needed to do. We did this to February 24th, which is the day of the ground invasion. It was Sunday morning, around 3 in the morning. Our unit gathered around a circle. We held each other in our arms. We said, with a chaplain in the middle, and we recited the St. Michael's prayer, defend us in battle. We gave each other a nod. We mounted our vehicles. We crossed the border to Iraq. We fought hard. For 100 hours straight, we fought hard. We captured the district Al-Saman. Thousands of Iraqi prisoners were on the road, and we just keep on going back. We had units back there to contain them. Our job was to push forward all the way to Kuwait, from the west side of Iraq all the way to Kuwait, 200 miles. Fighting, stopping, pulling, shooting. When we got to Kuwait, the horizon was pitch black. They had burned the oil fields. As we drove closer, all that oil mist got on us. We had waited till the other units cleared the city, and when we went inside, we heard the horror stories of what the Iraqi had done to the Kuwaiti people, how they would come in houses, how they would rape the women, and then kill entire families. Seeing the blood stains on the ground, I felt rage. I stopped crying at night, and I stopped begging for forgiveness. The Iraqi army who had caused this headed on the highway back to Baghdad, called the Highway of Death. Hundreds of vehicles. Coalition planes destroyed those hundreds of vehicles. We also had fire missions in too. After the war, I went back to Fort Bragg, finished my enlistment, was Army discharge, went home, started my career, went to college, Houston Community College. I held 3 jobs, part-time jobs to pay for my own living expenses. GI Bill paid for my college. I got tired of working 3 jobs. I dropped out of school at 51 hours, and then I got a job doing well, making over 6 figures in human resources. But what happened on 9/11 changed all that. As I'm sitting in the conference room looking at the TV, again, I felt that rage that somebody attacked us. I had to serve again. My dad was getting old. He was 78. So I wanted to not leave at that time. I wanted to spend that time with him and fulfill my duty as a son. When he passed away 2 years later, I re-enlisted. I wanted to be a tip of the spirit to go back and pay back what those who did this to us. I trained to get my Special Forces Green Beret. I was not able to. I was hurt. I almost died during that. Now, I'll tell about my dad. My dad was my hero. But there's another hero, and he's right here, Bruce Hoffman. He was my instructor. In the course, he saved my life. I would not be here. I would not have children. I would not have done the things I had if it hadn't been for Bruce. He may look like Santa Claus, but he was a fucking badass. So we went to Afghanistan. There was a mission, so both Bruce and I stepped up. We volunteered. I dropped out of the course. I was going to do the course later. Went to Afghanistan. During that time, of course, I wanted to pay back this country, but I also was feeling a lot of pain from losing my dad. It was like losing both parents. It was just me and him. We escaped Vietnam. He raised me. He was my mom and dad. When he died, it was like I felt like an orphan. I was looking to end that pain. So in Afghanistan, I volunteered for every single mission. I was looking for a good death. Any mission was out there, I was going to do it. Resupply mission, I'm in. Turret gunner, I'm in. Bruce and I, on the first picture, made it through the entire deployment unscathed. We had, obviously, contact with the enemy, but unscathed until the last month of the deployment. As we're driving through a market square, talking to people, there was a white vehicle waiting for us. And as we passed, he detonated. That's the vehicle. killed kids, 3 kids doing that. And I felt guilt because that was meant for me and my guys, not innocent children. I felt helpless. I wanted to have some skills to try to do something. At that time I didn't. I had just basic tactical medicine, but not full knowledge of the medic. So after the deployment, I came back. I want to be a combat medic. I want to have those skills to save people's lives. After graduating from the medic course, I volunteered to go to Iraq. Unfortunately, my hope of being that medic to save lives never happened because my reputation as a shooter preceded my medical ability. When there was a mission, they wanted me on the mission because they knew I was good behind the trigger. I ended up being that brigade's team leader for his personal security detail. Lavery was the former prime minister of Iraq, was exiled during Saddam's reign. We brought him back into the country. Our team was sent there to help coach, share best practices on his team on how to keep him alive. What I didn't expect in that deployment was 2 soldiers. We expected casualties. We expected enemy casualties, collateral damage. What I did not expect was mentally prepared for was 2 soldiers in a unit committing suicide on that deployment. And as a senior medic, I had to deal with aftermath. It was unacceptable. After coming back from that deployment, I started back in my career. I met my girl. Carpe diem. Be brave, be bold, go after your dreams. I made her an honest woman, had a military ball, got on my knees, and she said yes. She's my rock, my foundation. Mountains, I talked about. I never finished college. That was a mountain that I didn't think I was going to ever accomplish. How I was going to finish school with a full-time job, with a family, with kids. One step at a time, and I finally finished my undergrad degree. After I finished that, I'm on top of the mountain. I'm looking across, what's the next mountain? Why not? Applied. Some dumbass let me in. I figured I had to finish. Graduated from Harvard Business School. I got hired on an oil and gas company. I tried to get in oil and gas for a long time. No one would give me the chance because you didn't have any experience. Oil and gas. Well, how can I get experience? Kept on trying until I met a small company. Gary was the vice president of Express Energy. He hired me on, gave me my first chance. We built a program hiring vets because vets get the job done. They work in harsh conditions, they work away from home, they were squared away. The program blew up, became popular, got recruited in the Schlumberger to build that program. Hiring vets. But as I was building a vetting program to hire vets, I realized there's more things that we can address. I got to work for a $35 billion company of 100,000 people. We can do better. There are vets that are suffering from PTS, homeless vets. How do we address those issues? How do we address issues of vets that are not good at explaining their careers and losing opportunities, jobs to their civilian counterparts? So we taught them. We taught them how to build their career, whether they work for us or not. We shared our best practices of what we did in that program to other people. First time I spoke in front of 450 people, sharing our best practices to oil and gas executives. When I left the military, going through all those wars, going through an escape, I had some issues that I was dealing with. The VA's remedy with that is to load me up with pills. This didn't work, let's add more dosage, let's try a different pill. Let's sit in a circle and talk to your feelings about strangers, and that didn't work for me. I found my healing through helping the people that I care about the most, the community that I care about the most, which was vets. I found my healing through that. In 2024, after 10 years, I was laid off. Luckily, my wife and I just had put our life savings and we had prepared for this, and we opened up a small business. It was a chiropractic clinic. Be in the arena. It's not the critic that counts. It's you in the arena. Do the hard things. Do the things you don't think you can because you have one life. Live it to the fullest. So find your next mountain. Conquer that bitch and then find the next one. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Once this life is over, we're going back to where we are, where we came from, and it's full of love. But you don't get to go there unless you live through all the valleys and peaks of this life. So thank you for your time. Connect with me. The Latin phrase, fortune favors the bold. I'm Nick Tran. Thank you for listening to my story.
How's everybody feeling? Everybody good? Amazing stuff. Nick, where'd you just go? There you are. Unbelievable, brother. I've known you now for several years. I have yet to hear that in-depth background. I knew the wave tops. You're a very humble guy. You're a modest guy. I'm impressed with not only what you've been through, but your ability to get up here and share that, with the world. I know how difficult that can be. Certainly someone who takes pride in being a quiet professional and being a man of action, and yet somehow you've gotten to a point where you can get up here and talk about something that few of us could even possibly conceptualize in a way as if you were just talking about the weather. And I know that doesn't come easy, brother, so I appreciate you, I have respect for you. Give it up one more time for Mr. Nick Tran. All right, outstanding. So I'll give a quick introduction. As Nick said, so my name is Nick Lavery. I'm an active duty Green Beret with the United States Army Special Forces. This is something I've been doing now just shy of 20 years, which is crazy when you say it out loud, how fast it goes by. Just real quick show of hands, any veterans, current active duty service members, or family members of such? Throw your hand up, high and proud. Outstanding. Thank you all for your service. So at least most of the room can attest to how fast it does really go by, whether you serve for 10 minutes, 10 years, or 30 years. And to say that I love what I do would be something of a wild understatement. In fact, I consider it to be one of the greatest privileges a person can take on to dedicate themselves to a society in which we will defend at all costs. All right, I love what I get to do. Second to that, again, just quick introduction, and more significantly than that, at least to me, is I am a husband and I'm a father. My wife is actually also active duty special operations. She's actually been at this longer than me, coming up on 25 years, and she just actually started retiring officially a couple months ago. So I have a very unique vantage point of being alongside her and supporting her as she's going through a really difficult point in her life. And what I've gleaned from this, witnessing her going through this transition, as someone who's leading on her own terms, someone who's an absolute unicorn, an amazing asset, and for there's countless opportunities and options that she has at her disposal, almost too much, where that can almost be a problem in of itself. But even when all those stars seem to be aligned, it's still really hard for most of us to hang up the uniform. So what this has enabled me is just a little extra bit of perspective into the individual who is leaving military service under, say, less than optimal circumstances. Perhaps that's due to an injury. Perhaps that's due to some poor choice that was made. Perhaps they felt they could have served longer, yet for whatever reason their time is being cut short. You can imagine how difficult it can be when it's this hard for someone who's leaving with all the things working in her favor. We are the proud parents of two young boys. My oldest is 8, my youngest just turned 4. My youngest birthday is on St. Patrick's Day. So tell me he doesn't have some wild birthdays coming down the pipe in the not so distant future, God help us all. Any fellow parents here in the room by any chance? Yeah, quite a bit. You want to talk about something that'll change your perspective on some things like that, right? I mean, that moment when you're holding that little slug thing for the first time, little glowworm, it's just all of a sudden, all the things in the world that seem to be the most important things ever, just in that moment, all of a sudden just don't really seem to matter all that much. And of course, we continue to live life and we're inundated with priorities and responsibilities and obligations and passions, but I do think that those of us that have the privilege of having gone through parenthood are given an amazing gift. That gift is that gift of perspective. And at this point in my young dad life, again, 8 and 4, both boys, they're both absolute savage maniacs, for sure. I'm convinced, actually, at this point, they both wake up every day with one or both of these thoughts in mind. The first is, what's a new and creative way I can try to hurt myself? And then the second is, what's a new and creative way I can try to hurt my brother? And that just goes on a loop, 24/7, 365, always open for business. And I sit back trying to figure out where and when to step in from stopping a potential disaster from happening. And it's like, this just happened actually like a week ago. Like, this one's holding a baseball bat, which could probably cause a little bit of damage, but this one also kind of asked for it, too, a little bit. So maybe I don't want to rob him of this impressive, important lesson in physics that he is so desperately begging for. And I sit there trying to figure out where and when to step in. And, I shared some of those insights into my personal life, really not just solely to give you a glimpse of who I am outside of my profession, but because those three people are really at the core of the answer to the two questions I get asked most often, which are different variations of the how and the why. So how do you do what you do, or how did you do X, Y, Z? Or maybe a more important question to ask is why? Why did you do that, or why do you do this? Okay, those two questions are two that we're actually going to examine here a little bit over the next 35, 40 minutes. But just know for me on the upfront, at the center of both of those questions is my wife and our two boys. And then lastly, just to round out this quick basic introduction, I will address the elephant in the room. It's the thing that's on everybody's mind for sure. That way we can just handle it and we can move forward with business. I am from Boston, Massachusetts, all right? So, the cat is officially out of the bag. I know, I'm sure there's a lot of shocked people in the room right now. Do I happen to have any fellow massholes here in the room with me? My man, just one? Oh, you guys are killing me right now. Two, okay, we're evening things out a little bit, perfect. So, if at some point I say something crazy, you have no idea what I just said, reference these two guys, or maybe think about the movie The Departed or Good Will Hunting, try to put yourself in that space, and then maybe we can figure out what I'm talking about. Okay. I typically like to begin by answering the question, why did I decide to join the United States military? And this photograph right here really just answers that question, probably in its totality. In fact, I'm willing to bet most people in the room right now don't really need me to say another word, and you kind of just get it, right? I will give a little bit additional context. When this happened, I was a 19-year-old college football player. I watched this event happen live, and much like Nick, I really had never experienced that amount of rage and anger ever before in my life. I felt like I was under attack. I felt like planes were flying into me. And kind of the ironic part about that was, I've been in military service now almost 20 years. And back then, I did not have this red, white, and blue coursing through my veins like I do today. I was very much a typical 19-year-old college athlete knucklehead. But I was proud to be an American. And I can remember watching my fellow countrymen make the choice between burning alive in a building or jumping out of it. And that just did not sit well with me. All right, that's just not going to work. So I really struggled to stay in school. I met with my academic advisor. I was dead set on dropping out. Ultimately, I did decide to stay in, grind out the rest of my degree, and then began looking at options to enlist not long after graduation. Decided to go the route of the Army Special Forces. I came in as what's known as an 18 X-ray, otherwise known as a Special Forces recruit, which gave me a contract option for me to bypass any kind of military service in the conventional Army, go straight into the Special Forces pipeline, and after about 2 or so years of training was when I earned my Green Beret, got to my team, and then I went to work. It was on my third trip into Afghanistan in the fall of 2012 that I would be wounded in action on 3 separate occasions. The first, about 3 weeks after we arrived, was when I was wounded for the first time and took some grenade shrapnel to the back of my shoulder, as you might be able to see in that photograph right there. Blew about a lemon-sized hole in me. Sounds a lot worse than it was, to be honest. Really nothing that some gauze, an ace bandage, and a pressure dressing really couldn't take care of. About 12, 14 hours later, eventually I was medevaced out to get seen by a doctor. Took a look at it, taught me and my medics how to treat it, and about 3 or 4 days after that, I was back with the guys, just right back to work. Fast forward from this moment, maybe 6, 7 weeks, was when I was wounded for the second time, And it was here that I took an AK-47 round to the face. Now, I know that's an unusual thing to hear. More often than not, someone takes a rifle round to the face, they're not there to tell you about it. So I obviously got very, very lucky. It really just grazed the side of my cheek. It did crack my orbital bone into a few pieces. It nicked an artery, so it bled quite a bit. But in the context of what was going on around me at the time, this was literally nothing more than a scratch. See, 6 of my friends, as we made our way back from an operation, drove into about a 400-pound roadside bomb that just decimated their vehicle. All 6 of them were fighting for their lives. In this photograph right here, and I apologize for the poor quality, this was actually just a screenshot taken from one of my teammates that was wearing a GoPro helmet camera. The gentleman on the bottom right of that screen was actually one of our attachments. His name is John. John was in that lead vehicle. And this, what you're seeing here, is after we consolidated all of the wounded and we got them to a casualty collection point and began rendering aid, I had just finished actually putting John's eyeball back into his skull, which was hanging out down kind of around his cheek. What I like to highlight about this is, had I been wounded and no one else had been, things would have been seen much differently. I would have been treated much sooner. But in the context of that scenario, when 6 of our friends are all fighting for their lives, I'm talking limbs are blown off, eyes are falling out of heads, severe internal blast damage, guys are suffocating on collapsed lungs, all 6 really should have died. None of them did. In that scenario, nobody cares about Nick right now. Nobody. Particularly myself. And it's not because they don't care for me. These guys love me, and I love them. But there are more pressing matters at hand. And to me, this highlights the importance of really 2 things. One is the importance of training. You're not getting around that. We train deliberately, with intent, with intention, full scale, as close to reality as we can get. That repetition, those purposeful practice reps, is what enables us to make those really hard choices in real time. But the second component to that, which I think goes largely unnoticed, is the power of an emotion that we have that if once we choose to deploy it on purpose, enables us to do what really needs to be done in this scenario. The ironic part about this is it is arguably the most powerful emotion that we have. And it's one that military community members, law enforcement, first responders, even pro athletes, these type A aggressive go-getter individuals usually want nothing to do with. In fact, when I say it right now, people are going to start to squirm around in their seat, okay? Because that emotion I'm talking about is love. Arguably the most powerful one that we have that exists within this emotional entity known as a human being. The love of a teammate, the love of a brother. Yeah, I know what the right thing is to do because I've trained on it thousands of times, but what also enables me to do that is in that moment I care more about you than I care about myself, period. Well, fast forward from this moment a little bit, maybe now another 3-4 months. We're actually now towards the tail end of this deployment. So we infilled in September. We were set to leave in April, 6-month trip. It's now March of 2013. And those that I just totally lost, March is the month that comes after February. Okay? 2 guys in the room knew what I just said. Everyone else was like, what the hell is a March? It's a month. There we go. We're all on the same page. March 11th, actually, to be precise. And just prior to us loading up our vehicles, at this point, guys, we are beat up, we are tired, we've been going at it 5.5 months. Most of the guys on my team have been wounded in action at least once. We're ready to go home. But there's, of course, work to be done, so we're getting ready to go to work. Prior to us loading up our vehicles to begin making movement towards our target, a member of the Afghan National Police Force, a guy that we've been working with for months, climbed up on the back of a Ford Ranger pickup truck, had a mounted PKM belt-fed machine gun attached to it, that one right there, and opened fire into me and my friends from about 30 feet away. Several military people in this room right now, some may be familiar with the PKM. Those unfamiliar, this is a very powerful weapon system. It's a Russian-made belt-fed machine gun. This gun could rip a vehicle to shreds from 400 or 500 meters away, no problem. From 30 feet, which is basically me to that table right there, against human flesh, and it is quite catastrophic. 12 U.S. casualties total, including 3 of which were killed. One of those was our detachment commander, Captain Andrew Peterson Keel from Connecticut, was standing directly next to me moments before the round started flying, took 2 rounds to his face, dead instantly. 2 others killed, myself another 8 varying degrees of wounded. And to make matters a little bit more interesting, this was the initiation of a pre-planned complex ambush. What we didn't know, there were about 30 Taliban fighters that had our compound essentially entirely surrounded. So when this guy initiated from inside our perimeter, they all began launching mortars, RPG rockets, and unloading belt-fed machine gun down on top of us. It was a really bad day at the office. Those that were upright, they go to work and they begin repelling this ambush. I'm really in no position to address that, so I take a look at what I'm dealing with. Rip what's left of my right pant leg open to see my leg, and really, my leg really didn't look much like a leg at this point. It looked more like something that had gone through a meat grinder or like a shark had gotten a hold of and just kind of ripped it to shreds. I took an estimated 5 or 6 rounds to my right leg, which basically vaporized it. Exposed bone, exposed tissue, parts of my leg actually looked like it was almost turned inside out, and there is a river of blood that is pouring out of my body. Now guys, when I say a river, I mean a river. I imagine turning on a sink faucet or a garden hose at like mid to high strength and just letting it flow. That's the amount of volume that is pumping out of me. So I know at this point 2 things to be true without question. The first is your femoral artery has definitely been cut, which means you might have 8 or so minutes to live. Cool, roger that, got it. The second thing I know to be true, and again, I believe this with certainty, is that this is where you will die. And that is a very unusual, unique, emotional roller coaster ride to go on. And I was on that ride. Fortunately for me, I was able to get off that ride relatively quickly because I had a whole lot of work to do and I didn't have a whole lot of time to do it. So I grab a tourniquet off my equipment, strap it on, lock it in. Bleeding doesn't slow down at all. Said, cool, grab a second tourniquet, pull that off, strap it on, lock it in. Bleeding looks like it may have slowed down a little bit, but it certainly hasn't stopped. And right around now, one of my teammates gets to me. His name is Jason. Technically, Jason was an attachment, but he was with us prior to the deployment all the way throughout. We've been through a lot together. Very much considered a teammate. The look on Jason's face really confirmed everything I already knew to be true, which is, this is where you will die. And I can remember trying to convince Jason to go work on somebody else, both verbally and physically. Trying to physically, and I'm yelling at him to get off of me. I had put myself into what we would refer to as the expectant category of triage. And be familiar with the term triage. Basically nothing more in a mass casualty scenario than when you're organizing patients based off of priority. And that gives those of us that are rendering aid just a system to work within. Expectant patients being at the end of that, and barring some sort of unlikely event, some may choose to use the word miracle, expectant patients will die. And you do not invest precious moments or resources on expectant patients unless or until you have worked your way through all the other priorities. At this point in my career, I had been on both sides of the triage equation multiple times. And I can assure you, for those that have never been in that scenario, and I pray that you never are, that abiding by that protocol is the most difficult decision I have ever had to make in my life by a mile. When someone that you consider a brother is laying there, in pain, hurt, scared, and dying, and asking you for help, and you intentionally ignore that in order to work on somebody that's been deemed a higher priority. It is a brutal protocol to follow. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And I had been there before. So in my mind, I was really trying to help Jason make that really hard choice. He kind of ignored me to a degree. He added a third tourniquet. He got IV access for blood or medication. And at that point, he was pretty much at the end of his medical capability. So we said a quick goodbye, seemingly for the last time, and then he moved on. He had a lot of work to do. So I'm laying there. Things are exploding around me. Gunfire is ripping off the truck behind me. Our guys are returning fire. Aircraft start showing up on scene. It's complete and total chaos. People are screaming. People are dying. I say to myself, you know, man, I think you're still bleeding out. Well, I go to try to lift my leg up off the ground to see if I can notice any blood coming out of one of the entry wounds, because I was hit from behind. Well, my femur had been shattered into about 18 pieces. So lifting it up under its own power was not going to happen. So I grabbed it with my hands and I just pull it up. And sure enough, I see blood pouring out of me. And I said to myself, well, shit. That's not good, right? I only have so much of that red stuff in here. So I said, is there anything else I can do here? Do I have any other options? And the answer was yeah. I had really one last kind of trick up my sleeve. So I reach into my personal first aid kit, I pull out some gauze, I ball it up into what we call a power ball, which really just gives gauze a little bit of density to work with, basically creating a golf ball out of gauze. Loosen up the highest tourniquet. I'm now staring at one of the exit wounds, which is typically a much larger hole. And I ram this into the wound and up towards my hip in order to feel for the pulse of the femoral artery, in order to get direct pressure on the artery itself. Much easier said than done. Okay? When arteries are severed, they will typically retract. So I got an opening here, but where I need to get to is more like up here. So basically, at some point, I look down, and half my fist is inside my leg, which is a very unusual thing to experience, to say the least. At some point, I think I feel something. I kind of just say the hell with it. I press down as hard as I can. I feed all the rest of the gauze into the cavity on top of that, secure a tourniquet on top of the gauze, and then boom, I go unconscious. I come to maybe a minute later. I look at the work I had done. I have no idea if it did anything, but I am totally out of options. So now the next question is, how do you want to spend the rest of your life? Which for me, I was convinced I had maybe 10, 12, 15 seconds. How are you going to choose to invest those seconds? I decided to drag myself over, maybe about 10, 12 feet, to where some of my teammates were that were wounded. First guy I got to was our senior medic. His name is Elliot. Elliot had taken a round through his calf. Stable condition, tourniquet applied, but feeling every ounce of discomfort that comes with a properly applied tourniquet. Okay? I mean, tourniquets save lives, period. An amazing piece of medical equipment. But when done right, it sucks. And many of you probably know that. Hopefully, all of you know that. So he's feeling every ounce of that. I just figure I'll do what I can to kind of distract him, thank him for everything he did for me as a teammate, everything he did for me as a medic, thank him for everything he taught me as a man, and that's how this game of life would end for me. And I was surprisingly okay with that. Sure enough, 10, 20 seconds later, my peripheral vision starts to go, kind of looking through a soda straw, fade to black, game over. And then boom, my eyes wide open, staring at the sky, screaming, yelling, explosions, gunfire. I kind of look around and I say, I'm back. That's kind of cool, right? I mean, I'll take it. Wasn't expecting that, but we're going to call this a win. Rinse and repeat that process about a dozen or so times. Each time me convinced that this was it. It actually almost kind of got annoying, right? It's like, okay, for real, this time, this one really is it. Okay, it's got to be. And then boom, I'm back again. And I'm like, what the hell's going on, man? I'm just not going down. At some point I come to, I'm being carried on a stretcher, being loaded on a helicopter. And at this point, those that are controlling this medevac scenario have a couple options to choose from. That it had been over an hour and a half since I'd initially been hurt before I could get on a bird. So that 8-minute clock that I had started had long since come and gone. So some decisions need to be made. What they decide to do is take the first 2 lifts, so the first 2 helicopters of wounded patients, 3 patients on each, 6 patients total, and fly them to the closest medical assets to us, to a location at an outpost that has what's referred to as a forward surgical team, otherwise known as an FST or a FAST team. These are an amazing military resource. These are medical professionals that are capable of performing medicine, including surgery, in more austere, remote environments outside of a hospital. These guys are unbelievable at what they do. They're the closest trauma doctors to us. Get those 6 guys there now, and then send everybody else to Bagram. There's a reason why I'm sharing this detail. 6 patients puts that FAST team at capacity. I'm on one of those first lifts. When I tell you guys that when I arrived at this outpost that I was out of blood, I mean that I was literally out of blood. In fact, I've learned some details of this as recent as like 18 months ago that are still really hard for me to digest. I'm talking about paperwork from guys that physically worked on me on this day. For the sake of time, just know, completely out of blood. They rip me off the bird, they throw me on a transfusion, bring me into surgery, and begin putting my femoral artery back together. Well, it's about 2 or 3 minutes after that procedure is done that all of what's left of my vitals begin to just completely tank. My liver, my kidneys, my lungs, my heart, everything is dying. No one knows what the problem is, but they can no longer work on me. 5 of my friends are in beds next to me, dying. They have to divert their attention to them. They say, we don't know what's going on with Nick. Get him on a helicopter and fly him to Bagram, which most of you probably recall at the time, massive military base, full-scale hospital, all the resources, all the widgets, all the things you could need. So that's what they do. From where I was to Bagram was about a 12-minute flight by helicopter. And it's when I'm around halfway there that they realized that they had just pumped me full of 6 units of an incompatible blood type. And that's what was killing me. Now, when I shared that little story, that is the response I get 100 times out of 100. And chances are, right now, you're all thinking one or both of these things. The first is, you gotta be kidding me. Nick, that's what you were thinking, right? Of course, that would be a reasonable response. And then the second is perhaps, how does that even happen? Don't you guys have like protocols in place? Don't they check and recheck? Don't you have dog tags and Velcro patches and duct tape with your blood type all over you? And the answer is yes, we actually have all of those things. They clearly all failed. I will share with you very quickly as to how that happened. Me and one of my teammates, we were on beds next to each other. We have similar last names, and they just confused who we were. That's it. A simple mistake that really anybody could make. And I like to take this moment here quickly to remind us all of something that we already really know, and that is you could have all the determination, the discipline, the work ethic, the values, the ethics, the morals. You could have all those boxes checked, which I would say would be a great thing to do. And yet, despite that, people make mistakes, right? Nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect, particularly when you're operating under enormous amounts of stress, trying to save the lives of 5 Americans. People mess up, and that's what happened. You now may be curious to know, well, what happened to your teammate? Well, Owen, which is his name, happens to be blood type AB negative. Can anybody take a guess as to why that's relevant in this story? Thank you so much. AB negative is also known as the universal recipient, which means they can receive blood from anybody, and they're totally good to go. Less than 3% of people on planet Earth are blood type AB negative, and this lucky prick happens to be one of them. Now, you can't even make something like this up. So while Owen is soaking up all my delicious protein-enriched blood, feeling totally good to go, I have his toxic bullshit flowing through my body, and it's killing me. Something that he and I joke about to this day, literally. So they realize what happened. I'm 6 minutes out on a helicopter. I'm going to recite for you the radio transmission that was sent from that outpost to Bagram and then relayed to the helicopter. It goes like this. They explained the situation on what they just did. Okay, got it. Roger that. They said, it is impossible for Nick to survive this flight to you. They used the word impossible. We got a lot of people that are in the military, was in the military. That is not a word that you will hear during the execution of military operation ever. There is no such thing. We will find a way to get that done. But that's what they said. It is impossible for Nick to survive this flight to you. There is nothing the medics on board will be able to do. There's nothing you will be able to do when he gets there. He will be dead on arrival. Be prepared to receive his body. That was the radio transmission. And actually, my now wife was deployed to Bagram at that time and was on the receiving end of that call. The response was, okay, roger that. Eventually, I arrived at Bagram. I'm basically just a lump of flesh. They pull me in, they hook me up to every machine there is. I'm intubated, I'm on a breathing tube, I'm on dialysis, I'm on a fresh blood type with the right blood type, which I've heard is a good thing, allegedly. And I remained in a state in which doctors referred to as kinda alive for about a week. And it was like the 5th time I heard a doctor tell me that I'm like, dude, hold on a second. I've heard this kinda alive thing like 5 times. Is that like an official term that they teach you in med school? And he was like, yeah, pretty much, that's it. And I was like, okay, cool, I guess we'll just go with that. Basically, what we believe to be incapable of supporting human life according to technology, there's actually a bit of a gap in between that and actual death, this like gray space in between the two. And I basically just hung out there for about 8 days. And then I just kind of came back. And that's really the only way I can really explain that. To fast forward through this a little bit quicker, I would eventually arrive at Walter Reed, where this photograph was taken right here. Went straight into the intensive care unit as I was battling essentially all of the infection that had set into my body. Any one of them could kill me. And things were real touch and go. My mother was there, my father was there, my younger sister was there. And Walter Reed, those that have yet to experience it, is really an amazing location. Oftentimes I refer to it as the greatest place on earth that you never want to see. Because chances are if you're there, unless of course you're working there, it means something perhaps not so great has happened to you or someone you care about. But it really does highlight just how fortunate we are as Americans and as service members to have that level of care being thrown at you literally 24 hours a day. It almost gets to the point as a patient where it gets annoying. You want people to just stop helping you. Like, just leave me alone. Like, give me a minute, let me sleep. It's constant, which is amazing. So it's this whirlwind of activity while I'm in this room in the intensive care unit. I'm on all the pain management drugs, including a little thing known as ketamine. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah, you want to talk about a wild ride, ketamine will take you on. There was a point in time, as I'm on massive doses of ketamine and Dilaudid, that there was this like pinkish colored leprechaun creature living in the top corner of my room, and we were having like in-depth discussions about stuff. We were like figuring things out. It was like, oh, the whole like world hunger problem, like we definitely just wrapped that up. Like, what else you got? So I like barely know what's real, what's not. It's a nonstop flow of activity. At some point, I'd been there maybe 3 or 4 days. And all of a sudden, into my room comes a whole bunch of people wearing black suits, and they kind of set themselves up around the room. So of course I know immediately that I'm about to be abducted by aliens. And this is going to be a very interesting story, should I make it back to Earth at some point. And then, in walks the First Lady, which at the time was Michelle Obama. And there's really no mistaking her. Very distinct figure, and I'm whacked out of my mind, but I'm convinced there was almost this like aura around her as she just walked into the room. She walks in, she comes straight to me. She starts talking to me. I'm laying in this bed, she's talking to me. I have no idea what she's saying. I really have no recollection as I stand here now as to what I said back. I just recall mumbling and stuttering some kind of nonsensical gibberish back to her. So she's kind of like, okay, I'm not really getting anywhere with this dude right now. He's making precisely no sense. So I think I'm going to start talking to his mother. So her and my mother are having this conversation kind of right over the top of me. And at some point, I interrupt them and I say, excuse me, ma'am. And I say it so loudly and I say it so clearly that it like startled her. She like jumped back. And she's like, oh, this dude like totally just said something. That's pretty cool. So she leans in really, really close. She's like a foot off my face. And I said, I need you to do me a favor. She doesn't respond. I said, I need you to tell your husband that I'm still an asset, that I will be back, and don't give up on me. And she just starts crying. So she's crying, my mother starts crying, I think the Secret Service agents start crying, the pink leprechaun starts crying, like everyone or thing in the room is having this emotional moment except for me. I was just dead serious. In fact, if I'm being honest with you guys, I simply saw this as a strategic opportunity to get a message to the guy. That was it. If you've been in the military longer than a day or two, you realize that there's an exception to every policy. All it takes is the right person to put the name on the right piece of paper, and boom, anything can happen. And what this highlights to me is, despite me really not knowing much at all of what was real, what was not, where I was, what my condition was, the one thing that I could see crystal clear was my mission. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And that is, I was gonna go back to the teams. I was gonna go back to living the life I was put on this planet to live. It's important to know, and things have changed for me a little bit since. I mentioned perspective, becoming a dad. Things change as we progress. This is over 12 years ago now. But at that time, being a Green Beret, being a professional war fighter on behalf of a society really wasn't what I did. It was who I was. My entire identity was wrapped up in this one function. That was it. So I saw things very, very simply. Option A is you roll over and die. Option B is you figure out a way to get back to doing what you do. And in case you guys haven't already figured it out by now, I don't do very well with the whole rolling over and dying thing. So there's only one other option on the table, that's it. And at that moment, with the First Lady, I figured I'm probably gonna need a little bit of administrative support on this journey, okay? I'll take a shot. Maybe he'll listen to her. What I've come to realize to be a real hard truth, as me and my team get to travel the country and spend time with a variety of different organizations and a lot of different people, the hard truth is how many people, in fact, I would argue most, are floating through life day in, day out without knowing what their mission is. It's sad. It's a sad reality. These individuals with just no sparkle behind their eye, no passion, no purpose, no drive towards something, just day in, day out, monotonous, going through the motions. In my opinion, simply waiting for the inevitable. That is death. Here's the powerful reality about identifying your mission, is once you plant a flag into the future to serve as a beacon, to serve as a target, to begin moving towards, it allows you to proceed all energy to the how am I going to do this question. Because that what am I going to do question does not ever stop until you answer it. Whether that's on the back end of a bad day at the office, a difficult conversation with your spouse that didn't go all that great, an injury to your ankle, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? We've all been there. And you know what? We're all going to be there again. That's part of life. But the instant you can answer that question, now we're just talking about an equation. That's it. It's an equation, and I already know the answer because I said what the answer is. There is a way to solve for that answer. 3 plus x equals 4. Pretty easy to solve for x at that point. That may be the only utility in algebra I've ever had in my entire life, but it made sense to me then and it makes sense to me now. That's all I got to do. I got to turn one variable into a constant over and over and over and over and over and over again, and eventually I will turn that desired end state into a reality. That's it. And people tend to overthink this whole mission concept. They tend to overthink it. Like they have to find the perfect one. This paralysis by analysis. I just got to read one more book. I got to listen to one more podcast. I need one more hour of doom scrolling on TikTok. Like, yeah, that's where you're going to find the answer for sure. It's got to be perfect. Spoiler alert, guys. There is no such thing as a perfect mission, period. And here's another truth. No matter what it is going to change anyway. And I'll prove it to you right now. 3 things will happen. One is you accomplish it, and now you're on to the next one. The second is while en route to achieving it, you realize, you know what? I've learned a couple things on the way. I'm a different person than I am today than I was yesterday and last month. I think I maybe want to redirect in this direction. I think that's it. We've all been there. Does that mean that all the work and effort and sacrifices and knowledge transfer that you've earned over time while pursuing that one thing is now all for nothing? No, of course not. You wouldn't be positioned to make that pivot unless you had done it to begin with. And the third alternative, which is the more unfortunate one, is you just drop dead, which can happen. I don't want to end this on a sour note, but it's one thing we all know to be true. This game will end. And to that point, I want to highlight that hard truth. If we can all agree that this game that we're all living here right now in this room, this game known as life, is 1, a gift, and 2, finite, meaning it will end, the only question really is, why not leave it all out on the field? What do you really have to lose? This is not a dress rehearsal. That's it. We got one shot at this and it's over forever. Why not go big? Is it going to be scary? Yup. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. Are you going to fail over and over and over and over and over again? Yes, because you need to. That's the only way to make it real. but I would argue that it is worth it. I saw my mission in this bed, in this room, as I was still fighting for my life. Well, fast forward from here, after about a year at Walter Reed, I went through about 40 or so surgeries on my right leg as they were just incrementally amputating it piece by piece. Eventually, we get that under control. I returned back to my unit at the time, was 3rd Group out of Fort Bragg with my man over here. Found myself in what would end up being about an 8-month administrative street fight with the United States Army, who really did their best to force me to become a civilian. So I had to dig my heels in, refuse that answer. Yes, I have 2 heels. You can all chuckle if you want. Refuse that end state. And when I say that I went truly all in on this, I meant that. I had to temporarily burn some relationship bridges as I circumvented the chain of command a couple, 2, 3 dozen maybe or so times. But I figured, you know what? What are they going to do? Kick me out of the Army? You're actively trying to do that right now. Let me tell you something. When you go up against someone who truly has nothing to lose, or at least fully believes that they have nothing to lose, you are dealing with a very dangerous individual. And when that can be wielded towards something positive, you better get on board or get the hell out of the way. That was where I was at. I'm all in. There is no plan B, there is no contingency, there's no backup. When I say burn the boats, I mean literally burn the boats. That's it. One of 2 things is going to happen. I'm going to make this vision a reality, or I'm going to die trying, and I am surprisingly fine with either of those outcomes. I'm already on borrowed time anyway, so why not? During this time, I was working as an instructor teaching combatives, which is a military term for hand-to-hand combat, living my life in a way which could very easily be described as complete and total insanity. You guys have this book in front of you right now titled Objective Secure. In that book, you will see what a typical 24-hour period looked like for me during this time. If you choose to take a look at that, your first thought will likely be, this guy is crazy. And that's fine. Admittedly, I kind of was. Truly had lost my marbles at least a little bit. But I believe that that's what it was going to take. When I say that I got rid of every single task and relationship that was in my life at that time that was not directly correlated with making that one outcome a reality, those were removed. That was it. And it's one thing to remove an hour of Netflix a night when you get home. I get how difficult that can be. Or a glass of wine. Or a night out with your friends one weekend a month. Giving up tasks is difficult. But in my opinion, it pales in comparison to giving up relationships. I'm talking about people who are energy drainers in your life. We all have them, almost certainly. Those are real hard choices to make. And I had to make that several times. I'm talking about guys that I was in high school with, long-standing relationships with, that during this phase, I just had to zoom out and take a look at who was in my circle. And I realized 2 things. One is you don't need a big circle, you need a strong circle, period. And 2 is, you know what? I have to start cutting some of this dead weight. I have to. If you are not pouring kerosene on my fire, you are removed from the circle. That's it. And I told myself with basically all these individuals that it was going to be a temporary thing. You know what, brother? I just can't do this with you anymore. We had some great times, some great memories. I will look back on those kindly and fondly. I just can't do this right now. I hope you can understand. I have to go all in. Once I make that real, we'll pick things back up. 3, 4, 5 times. You know how many of those people are in my life right now? Not one. Not one. And you know what? I'm good. They're in my prayers. I wish them nothing but the best. At some point, we're going to come face to face with that hard truth, with that crossroads of the people that are within our lives. We cannot underestimate their influence on our today and our tomorrow, because it's present. Once I'm allowed to stay on active duty, I let my leadership know that I want to get back onto the teams. They knew this was coming. And despite that there had never been a one-legged guy to go back to an ODA, a Special Forces detachment, they gave me the chance to demonstrate my ability to do that. Threw the absolute kitchen sink at me. Ended up being about 12, 13 weeks of different assessments and tests. A lot of that was obviously physical, but they started giving me proficiency evaluations, cognitive assessments, psychological screenings. I mean, really did their due diligence, and rightfully so. There was a whole bunch of commanders that were about to assume an enormous risk by putting a one-legged guy back on a team that was going back into Afghanistan to conduct counterterrorism operations. At the conclusion of that pipeline, I was given the green light to return back to my team. I went back to the same one I was on when I was wounded, and about 7 weeks later, we were back in Afghanistan, conducting full spectrum combat operations. At this point, I'm considered the first and the only Special Forces operator that's returned to combat as an above-the-knee amputee. Since then, I've deployed to combat many additional times. Most of my operational time has been in the Middle East and in Eastern Africa. And what I used to say is, I'll continue to do what I do for as long as I can, because I love what I do. But the truth is, despite how much I love it, I'll continue to do what I do for as long as I'm an asset to the person to my left and right. Because at the end of the day, particularly in this business, that really is black and white. You are either an asset or you are a liability. You either meet the standard or you don't. And if you don't, it's time to move on and figure out something else. There is no margin forever. There is no gray area. 12 guys on a team that are going to be sitting behind enemy lines in the denied area to conduct bilateral combat operations against fierce adversaries. There is no gray. Asset, liability, which one is it? Our adversary doesn't care how many limbs we have. You either perform to that standard or you don't. I mentioned earlier we were going to speak on the how and the why. I mentioned a couple of the how components here briefly. This book in front of you right now really does answer that question. Those of you that were eager to read an autobiography or the Nick Lavery story are going to be wildly disappointed, because that is not what this project is about. This is a manual. This is a guide to goal achievement. This is what I followed in real time to do what I just shared with you. There's a lot of insights into the how in there. A lot of sets and reps and all of my fellow meatheads in the room that want to know grams of protein. It's in there, okay? Guys are good to go. I got you, bro. We're good. I want to take the last 3-4 minutes and address that second question, which in my opinion is a more significant one, and that is the why. Why did I do that, or why do I do the things that I do? And really, I'll be honest with you guys, it took me years to be able to figure out this answer. I had some cookie-cutter responses when I would get that kind of question from people, just get away from me. It took me years of prayer, reflection, analysis to actually come up with the answer. There's 4 components to it. The first element of my why is the word faith, okay? It's the word faith. Now, I realize that the word faith has a very strong religious, biblical tone to it. It does for me. I am an unapologetic Christian, for sure. That's a huge part of how I live my life. But it doesn't have to be. It's up to you. Our definition of faith is a firm belief in something with or without proof. Speaks nothing about a God or a higher power. That's not my opinion, that's the dictionary talking. A firm belief in something with or without proof. So I believe in some things. I'll share with you a few of them. I believe that we live in the greatest country in the world. I believe that to be true. Now you may be sitting there saying, you know what, Nick, like you're an active duty soldier, you kind of have to say that. No, I don't. I don't have to say that. It would probably be unwise of me to get up here and bash the United States that employs me, but I don't have to believe or share with you that I believe we live in the greatest nation ever. But I do believe that to be true. Part of what my military career has gifted me, amongst many blessings, is one we've already talked about, similar to becoming a parent, is the gift of perspective. I've spent time, as has many of you, in first world, fully developed nation states, fourth world war-torn disaster zones, and everything in between. And I can assure you, those that are unfamiliar, or those that want to second guess it, that this place right here, that most of us take for granted every single day, is absolutely 100% a beacon of hope of what is possible across a cold and harsh and nasty world. This man right here knows exactly what I'm talking about, as do probably most of you. The United States represents what's possible. Are we an imperfect system? Of course we are, because we're led and run by human beings, and not a single one of us is perfect. Have we made mistakes over the years? Of course. Go back history far enough, some brutal atrocities. But are we also babies? Yes. Have we also advanced what is possible on this little globe that we all share? By a mile. So I believe we live in the greatest country in the world, one worth dying for. Another thing I believe in is that freedom is not free. Does anybody in this room right now think freedom is free? You sure? I would love to have a spirited discussion about this right now. You can tell I'm getting all fired up. You sure you want to go down that road? Probably not. Okay. No, because it's not. Okay? I don't even think that's an opinion. I would say that that's a reality. Freedom comes with many, many, many costs. Blood, sweat, tears, treasure. Somebody is paying those costs. In fact, most of the people in this room right now are part of the people that have paid those costs. Somebody has to step forward. Somebody has to walk into the breach. Otherwise, all this right here, boom, gone, just like that. So someone has to go forward. The question then may be, well, who? Who has to go forward? I'm going to steal a quote from my man Edmund Burke, who stated this in the early 17th century when he says, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." I believe that to be true. I'd probably tweak that slightly. This was written hundreds of years ago, and say the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. But I agree with the sentiment 100%. That is all that's required. It's for good people to do what you guys are doing right now. I'm not talking about you specifically, but basically sit on their ass and watch as evil conquers. That's all we got to do. So if we know good people have to step up and step forward, the last reference I'll use to explain my why and my beliefs does come from the Bible, comes from Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, which states, "And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?' And then I said, 'Here I am. Send me.'" Someone's got to go, period. You were all amongst those that decided to take that step forward. I don't care what you did in the military. I don't care how long you did it. You were all amongst the 0.01% of this amazing nation. Most won't do it. You guys decided to, and I'm grateful for that. Why else, though, Nick? Belief is great, but why else? The second component to that is I'm competitive. Anybody else in this room competitive? Yeah, probably all of you are competitive. I like to win. And yeah, as much as I like to win, I hate to lose more. And there is a difference. Would you agree with me? Right? Losing feels worse than winning feels good. And there was just simply no way I was going to lose under these circumstances. Having my leg shot off by a machine gun by a guy that I taught how to use the gun, who killed 3 of my friends, there's no way this is how this chapter of my life ends. I am going to find a way to come back. I'm going to be relentless. At times I will be completely and totally unreasonable. I will never quit. I'm going to make you regret not killing me when you had the chance. You done messed up, Ron. You done messed up. Because before it was strictly business, and now it is personal, and I am pissed. Now you may hear that and say, you know what, Nick, that's actually kind of like shallow. You know what, maybe it is. I don't know. You know what, I also don't care. Because that one sentiment alone is what got me through the first 18 months of my recovery. That's it. The third component to my why is a word I've mentioned already, and that's the word passion. I love what I get to do. And while I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, admittedly, I like jumping out of planes and sliding down ropes on the rooftops, blowing holes in doors, shooting bad guys in the face. I enjoy those things. But that pales in comparison to where the true love of the game comes from. It comes from the people that I get to do it alongside of. This photograph alongside me is a man named Mr. Eric Iman. This picture was taken in 2015, the top of a mountain in Afghanistan, my first deployment back as an amputee. Eric replaced me on my detachment when I was in the hospital recovering from this. Once I got back to the teams, I rejoined him. He actually became my senior, and now we were teammates. 2018, I was in Lebanon on a separate mission. Him and the guys were back in Afghanistan. Eric and his truck hit a roadside bomb, killing Eric. It's the people is where my love comes from. I'm talking about some of the greatest human beings that have ever walked the face of the earth, you included. These are humans that are willing to sacrifice enormous amounts of themselves and push themselves to the absolute extreme limit of human capability and then somehow find a way to keep going beyond that. There are times in my career when I'm alongside these people doing it with them, and I just sit back in awe, going, how did we get so lucky that we have people like this, people like you, that are willing to volunteer to put themselves through this kind of suffering for shit pay for a largely unappreciative nation, all based on this idea, an idea known as the United States of America. How did we get so lucky? That is not the norm across the world. In fact, this is wildly unique to the United States. There were people like Eric and people like you that are willing to put it on the line and push that hard for each other and for a belief. It just blows your mind. I had no interest in living my life outside of anyone other than that. And lastly, as to my why, is the sense of purpose I get with what I do. Many ways to define purpose. I'll define it for you right now as I see it. Being a part of something bigger than yourself that creates an impact on others. You see, passion is for me. I love what I get to do. Purpose is for you, or for them, or for somebody else. And in a world in which there are essentially zero certainties, some would argue, here's one that I've come to believe to be true, is when you stack these ingredients on top of each other, an unwavering belief in something, a willingness to fight and win, a true love of the game, and a sense of purpose with what you do, guys, that word impossible that I've heard many times throughout my career, it begins to erode. It loses all credibility. It isn't real. The only thing that is really impossible are the things that you decide are impossible in your own mind. I'm pointing at you, the young people. You understand what I'm saying? That's it. Are others going to tell you that's impossible, or that's unlikely, or that's impractical? Probably. It isn't real. You decide what's impossible, that's it. But it's a mirage. If you want it bad enough, and you are willing to do what it takes to make it real, you can solve that equation. There is a way to get to yes. I want to close this out quickly. I know this is Military Appreciation Week, which I didn't even know was a thing until this year. Pretty cool. I hear thank you for your service probably more times than most people in this room. I think that's a great thing. I think that's something that we should sustain. I think it's outstanding. When I hear that at the grocery store, at the gas station, my heart is filled with pride and love and appreciation. I say thank you, okay? I think we should keep doing that. I want to be very clear, because I will likely hear that again before I leave this building, and I think it's a great thing. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to speak for myself, but I'm confident I speak for others when I say if you really want to be appreciative of the military or our veterans, the way you do that is by living your life to the absolute fullest. It's by going big. It's by taking full advantage of the freedoms and amazing opportunities that we have in this great nation, because largely based on what our military has done, is doing, and will continue to do. If you want to thank me or a fellow veteran, live your life to the fullest. That's my request. Thank you guys all so much for your time, and God bless you all. Thank you, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give him another big round of applause.